guys, this is Guy Chessman, and today I would like to examine a game of mine against FIDE Master Palacios Llera from Italy. And this game took place on the internet. It was a 2 minutes plus 1 second time control. And I was white here. Palacios Llera was black. So I played pawn to e4. He played pawn to c5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop b5. This variation is relatively popular and is a solid choice for white. Usually white plays pawn to d4 here, but I decided to choose a quiet positional game because I wasn't in the mood to play some attacking chess. Now pawn to g6, pawn to c3. Black played pawn to g6 because he wants to quintetto his bishop to g7, and he wants to control dark squares, so I decided to put a pawn here in c3 in order that the black bishop that would be placed on g7 later would be like just eating granite along the diagonal, because I've already placed a pawn to c3 there. Pawn to c3 also supports the pawn center, like pawn d2 to d4 later. Now knight to f6, attacking the e-pawn, pawn to d3, defending it, bishop to g7, white castles, black castles, rook to e1. A simple developing move. There's nothing much I could say about this move, but anyways, it's still a good move because it doesn't harm the position for white. Now queen to b6, just directly attacking the bishop on b5, and perhaps if white decides to capture the knight, I think the white queen would capture, and black does that in order to justify his previous move, which was queen to b6. Now pawn to a4. Knight to e5 would be kind of tempting, but after queen to b6 or queen to c7, then black already has this threat of pawn to d6. For example, pawn to f4 and pawn to d6. And nothing much has changed for white. In fact, black might already have some kind of advantage here because he has rapidly developed his pieces by the form of bishop to g4. Anyways, back to the actual game. Now after queen takes c6, white plays pawn to a4. Perhaps you're stopping pawn to b5, although pawn to b5 would still be possible, but this would now be a bit annoying for black if you ever plays that move. So black plays pawn to d6, not worrying of pawn to e5. Although pawn to e5 is still possible, and I think pawn to e5 is kind of a good move, but white doesn't want to commit himself too early, especially when his pieces in the queen side aren't that developed. So instead of pawn to e5, white plays knight bd2, just developing. And maybe in the near future, white could play pawn to e5 finally, if he develops his pieces first. Now, pawn to b6. So what is the threat of pawn to b6? There is no direct threat with pawn to b6, but perhaps black would like to play bishop to a6, just attacking the pawn on d3. For example, if we just play pawn to h3 here, then bishop to h6 might be possible. Anyways, back to the game. After after b pawn to d6, now I played here, queen to e2. Basically, what white is saying here is that he wants to play pawn to e5, and it also defends the d3 pawn from any bishop to a6. Now, bishop to b7, as if black wants to play pawn to d5, or as if black wants to mate the white king on g2. Anyways, I just played pawn to h3. This pawn move prevents black from playing knight to g4, which could then come to knight to e5 later. Now knight to d7. Still, black could move to e5, but I just played knight to c4. For that, rook to e8. What is black doing? Actually, black is just developing his pieces, improving his pieces, and so does white. Because there is no direct threats. In both sides, there are no immediate threats they could make. So both sides right now are just developing and trying to improve their pieces. And hopefully, once their pieces are improved, they could create some threats. Now, bishop to f4. White really wants to play pawn to e5 sooner or later. Knight to f8. Perhaps going to knight to e6, which would be quite bothersome towards the bishop in f4. Queen to f1. What does queen to f1 do? As far as I remember, I think queen to f1 defends the g2 square, and therefore white is now ready to play pawn to e5 sooner or later. Anyways, black plays knight to e6, and white had to retreat with bishop to g3. Pawn to a6, threatening pawn to b5, which is quite obvious. Now queen to e2. I just put my queen to e2. Perhaps I was provoking black to play b5 because after pawn to b5, I had this move, knight to a5. Just forcing some exchanges. In either case, I think black was a little bit happy with this move because that meant that his bad bishop would be exchanged. But I think this bishop of b7 would prove to be quite useful, especially when black has already played pawn to d5, just breaking out on the a8 to h1 diagonal. So I think it would have been useful, and I think black should have kept that bishop, even though at first glance it looked like as if it was a bad bishop. Anyways, after queen to b6, which black had to do, I captured the bishop, black recaptures, now queen to d2. What is white doing? Actually, white isn't really doing anything, to be honest. He's just trying to improve the position of the pieces, and now black takes an a4 in order to open the b file. White recaptures. Now rook e to b8, threatening to capture the pawn on b2. b4, pawn takes. Now pawn takes. Rook takes is kind of ugly because it weakens the pawn at c3. So I took with the pawn. Now knight to d4. What is black doing? Maybe just wants to exchange. Now pawn to e5. This was a good move, I think, because now white finally plays e5, and if black captures, which he did in the actual game, to that queen to b5, I simply played a very good move, bishop takes. I think black didn't see this move because after takes, I've already a strong mating attack. Black tried to prevent this. After that, boom. Anyways, thank you for watching this video, and if you like the video, please click the subscribe button. Thank you and goodbye.